This is a video regarding converting an RSV-R 1000 Aprilia to Tuono spec. I bought this Aprilia about 2.5 years ago, and I bought it really for the Acra twin exhaust that it had on it. I managed to get it at a good price on eBay because the guy had spelt Aprilia with 2 L's, so I was the only bidder. I've ran it for the last couple of years on track, a little bit on the road. I've played about with it, as some of you already know, and this is a video where we're going to change it from the RSV-R spec to a Tuono spec. There's a couple of ways of moving a RSV-R with clip-ons to high bars. You know, it's cheap and cheerful way, where all you need to do is chop back slightly the nose cone to give clearance for the handlebars. Find some cheap handlebars and risers from eBay, a couple of slightly longer clutch and brake cables, and that should about do it. If you want to go the slightly more expensive and harder job, I suppose, you're going to need a Tuono belly pan. You're going to need a couple of air intakes. You're going to need some bolts for the coil covers, and the proper Tuono handlebars, risers and top yoke. This top yoke is of Sachs model forks, and so we're going to have to use some spacers to make it fit, and also worth getting a proper Tuono nose cone. Once you've got all those parts, then it's time to make a start. So the first thing we need to do is remove all the bodywork, if that's the way you're going to go. As I say, it is possible to just cut back the fairing to give some room for the bars, and you can also use the belly pan and the coil covers. This is, as I said, it's a fairly standard RSV-R. Got some AP rear sets on. It's got a TI can that came from another bike of mine, and it's got some wheels that originally were on my V4 Tuono. So let's get on with removing the fairing. Back soon. Okay, so we now have the fairing removed. The wiring hanging around. So we're ready for the next section. Here's all the bits that we took off. Keep them safe, because if you want to put your bike back to standard, then you're going to need them. Okay, we're at the first, I suppose, technical part of the job. As I said, this is an RSV-R, so it's got Olin front forks. The circumference of the top at the top of the forks, I think, is 50 millimeters, whereas a standard RSV has, I'm not sure if it's shower or Sachs forks, and those are 53 millimeters, so they're not, the top yoke isn't a straight fit. You can see from this top yoke that in the past I've drilled and tapped it, because I've actually put high bars on this using the parts I showed you earlier from eBay, and it's worked well. It's used mostly on track. I've lost it off the trailer, I've come off twice, and they've held up perfectly, so not a problem. So next thing is, let's have the top yoke off. Okay, so we've loosened off the bolt at the top using a hexagon. We've removed the top yoke, which is down there. When you take yours off, you'll find that it's these ignition switches held on by a bolt and what looks like a snapped off bolt. This means you'll need a hammer and chisel to to get that bolt loosened off before you can unscrew it, and that probably means you're going to have to undo the wiring and take the switch and the top yoke onto a bench or something to do that. Okay, next thing is removing the clip-ons. Depends what sort you've got and how they're held on, but the best thing to do is loosen all the bar paraphernalia off. On the left hand side you'll have to again loosen the switches and the clamp off for the clutch lever and remove the rubber grip, and we'll be back to look. Okay, we've got the top yoke off, we've got the bars off. Now's the time to remove the clutch and the brake lines, because you're going to be putting longer ones on. I'm not doing it on this one, it's already got the long lines on already, so it's just a matter of leaving things as they are. When you put in the top yoke back on, as I say, this is the one we're using. It's off an RSV Tuono. It's as well to build it up like this to start with, then take the handlebars back out, then you get the bolts tightened up correctly underneath, because it's very difficult to do once it's on the bike. So let's move on. Okay, we've got the top yoke here, and as you can see there's a fair bit of clearance between the yoke and the stanchion, and that's where these little things come in. You can buy them off eBay and they fit into here, and then they fill the gap up. Okay, that's the top yoke fitted. You might be able to see those spacers that we talked about earlier. Before you fit the top yoke, if you're not going to extend the throttle cables, then have the throttle cables running out of here. And again, before you put the handlebars on, it's worth making, before you put the top yoke at least finished and tightened up, just make sure all the cables are running correctly for your new handlebars. Okay, that's probably the most difficult part of the job done. Handlebars are on. You can see how we've routed the standard throttle cables a little bit short to go around the key lock stuff where they did originally. We've got the brake cable, the brake lines on, we've got the clutch lines on. As I said, these were originally long enough, so we didn't have to swap them. If you've not bled these brakes before, my advice is to bleed them from the bottom, which means using a plastic syringe, eBay again, a couple of quid, and fill it up with fluid, let the bubbles subside, and then force the liquid up the lines and out of the bleed nipples. I find that's quickest and easiest way to go and do these things. You might have had to muck about with your wiring cables to get them nicely tidy put away, and but as I say, that's one of the most difficult parts of the job. Okay, we're on coil covers next. The bike's already got a carbon cover for the water bottle, so just leaving that in place. These brackets and the bolts that hold the coil need removing and replacing with these. If you're lucky, you'll have these original ones from a Tuono. If not, I made some from some 6mm bar and nuts and bolts and washers, and they work fine. They did the job. They just space out. They hold the coils in place and then space out enough to put the coil covers on. Okay, so we've got the mounting bolts on. We've now got a carbon coil cover. This is one that I damaged on a Aprilia Tuono a few years ago. I've had to cut the bottom so that it fits around the crash bung, but once it's on, it looks fine. Okay, so we've got the coil cover on. We've also put the air inlet on. And if you're fortunate enough to have any of these carbon end covers for the radiator, then time to stick them on. Works perfectly well without, and even if you don't have the air intakes, I ran this one for a year without any air intakes, no problem at all, while I found some. So I've got both air intakes on. We've got the coil cover on the left hand side. We're now putting the belly pan on. If you're not using the original one, the original one looks quite good actually, but this we're going to use a proper one. You need to make a bracket up for the rear, and go around the other side. Either, if you're lucky, you can find the correct bracket. If not, again, it'll mean just a little bit of fabrication of a bracket. Okay, so that's the job done. We now have a RSV-R Tuono. We've had to take the headlight out of the old unit and put it in the new one. The indicator brackets were, I'm not sure what they are, but they had a builder in who left them. Something to do with the brickwork, I've no idea. Anyway, I made them into indicator brackets. Put a mirror on, and Bob was your uncle. Tuono.